What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then just welcome to my channel. Go ahead, hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless you're a hater, because haters don't really like it here. But some of them come back and watch though, and I see you.
We see each other. We see each other.
Keep coming back, it's cool. I don't have a dramatic intro for today's video. I'm so sorry about it. Today's video is about Zachary Bowen and Addie Hall of New Orleans, Louisiana. This story was requested by the beautiful Tariana Jones. Thank you, girl. Tariana, let's talk, girl. Because when I first saw your comment, I did what I always do. I did a quick Google search, and when I read the synopsis, I was like, girl, what? Tariana, girl, what is you sending me? Like, this is a mess. I did a lot of research. Y'all spent so much time researching this story. I really did. It was completely captivating. Like, I don't know, something weird about this one. Like, this one really drew me in. It was so weird. And strangely, I'm kind of glad that it's over. But nonetheless, it was a good suggestion. Thank you. If you have a suggestion, leave it in the comments. Just remember, no children. I do not do children. A lot of you keep on asking for Michelle Blair. I refuse. Like, I can't and I won't. But without further ado, let's just get into the video. Zachary Bowen was born on May 15th, 1978 in Bakersville, California. Is he a Taurus? He's a Taurus. You know what? I see in my comments a lot of people that say she rarely does a Taurus. She hasn't done a Taurus. But if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the craziest ones are Tauruses. Because I know Dahmer is a Taurus. Bundy is a Taurus. John Wayne Gacy is a Taurus. Child, y'all really be doing the most. My mom is a Taurus. My sister's a Taurus. Oh, wow. I feel like this jacket is making too much noise. Hold on. His parents, Lori and Jack, were described as free-spirited hippies, which, I mean, this is the 70s, so yeah, that's pretty much how a lot of people got down. Not long after having Zach, the couple decided that they were tired of like this normal life of going to work every day, having a job. What they really wanted to do was travel the country, just live out their free-spiritedness. So they packed up their son Zach and his older brother Jed, who was 6 at the time, and they hit the road, traveled the country until they stumbled upon Seattle, Washington. They really liked Seattle and decided, you know what, we could stay here. Like, this could be a thing. Now, a couple of years go by. After like around the 5th year mark, Laura was ready to settle down a little bit, but Jack was still living the free-spirited party life. He was still out on the party scene, bar hopping and living it up with his friends, and Lori did not like that. Sis said, we got these kids to take care of. I need you to be a little more responsible. And Jack was like, no. Jack was like, I'm here for a good time. Sis, not a long time. These differences ultimately led to Lori reaching her breaking point within their marriage and deciding, I'm just gonna leave you. She files for divorce and takes her sons and moves to Santa Maria, California, leaving Jack behind in Seattle, partying like a rock star. The two co-parented as best that they could, and Jack would see his sons kind of on the rare occasion, but he still was involved in their life and their upbringing. He wasn't like my daddy, child. All tea and all shade. He was still very involved in his children's life, but he was not the strict parent. Lori was the stricter parent and Jack was the cool parent. Now, as the boys grew up, Jed developed a more reserved and shy personality, whereas on the contrast, Zach was very much outgoing. He was described as being a class clown. He was just that guy. Loud and rambunctious all through the high school hallways. Although he was outgoing, a class clown, and described as like very popular, he was also very insecure because by the time Zach reached high school, he was 6'10", okay? 6'10", and he wore a size 17 shoe. He was very, very insecure about this, about his height and his shoe size. I don't know if homie was teased about it. I just know he was very, very much insecure, and he felt like despite his popularity, he still stood out and didn't really fit in with everybody else because of his height and his long feet. He did not like feeling different, not for those kind of reasons. But still, like I said, He was a very popular guy. He made decent grades, and 1996 was his senior year of high school. He runs for homecoming king. Unfortunately for him, he does not win homecoming king. He actually loses. Apparently, it was this very embarrassing ordeal. I don't know if it was just the loss or if something else had happened, but probably just the loss, because you know how when we in high school, we're around the age, we feel like everything is just so mortifying and important and embarrassing. And then 10 years down the line, you're like, I was really tripping over that. How ridiculous is that? After this happens, he decides that, oh my God, I'm so mortified. I don't want to stay in Bakersville anymore. I just can't. How can I continue to live here? He tells his mother that he wants to move to Seattle with his dad because he can no longer face the people that he lost in front of here in Bakersville. And she was at first concerned because she felt like Seattle was this party scene and she didn't want him to go there and party and do the things that his dad did when they moved to Seattle, especially with his dad being more like a friend than a parent. She just felt like, you know, he was going to go there and they were just going to be partying it up together. But at the same time, she understood her son's free-spiritedness and she didn't want to stand in the way of that. She didn't want to hinder her son living out his heart's desires. And so she agreed to allow him to move to Seattle with his dad, which sis was 18, so she kind of didn't have a choice but to support it because he could have gone if he wanted to. Before moving to Washington with his dad, Zack planned this big celebratory road trip. He planned to hit several large party towns, with New Orleans being the final stop, and then he would return home, get his stuff, and then move to Seattle. That was the plan. So he got to New Orleans and saw everything that they had going on. He immediately fell in love with the city. Instead of just going there, hanging out for a while, hitting a couple of bars, and then heading back home, Zack decides to stay and he finds himself a little apartment. Once he settles into New Orleans, he enrolls in school, but he felt just as awkward as he did in high school, and so he did not remain in school. He dropped out. He felt just as out of place and different as he did back home when he was in school. After he drops out, he begins to spend a lot of his time drinking on the French Quarter, which he wasn't even 21 at the time. So I don't know how sis was getting away with it, but he was. They probably assumed that he was 21 because of his height. I don't know. Maybe it was his charming personality and his handsome good looks, because by this time he was 6'10". He was described as very handsome. He had dimples, a nice body. He just had it going on. I do know his charm and handsome good looks did help him to finesse a job as a bartender at one of these little establishments. It was this little place that served to-go cups of liquor where you could walk up, place an order, and then they hand you your little liquor out of the window. And he was very good at his job. He had this great personality. People loved him. He had the ability to lure people in and get business. And so that's just what he was out there doing. Bartending and partying. Working that job, he meets Lana Shupak, a 28-year-old dancer from Dallas. Now, Lana was just in town for the weekend and she was there to party with her friends. Lana was described as this busty brunette, this hot, sexy young girl with this great personality. And then you got Zack, who was looking how he was looking, and so they caught each other's eye. Their attraction for each other was instant and mutual. He flags her down and asks her and her friends to come have shots of Jaeger with him. They do. It's just a good old time. The two bond, they hit it off, exchange numbers. She actually spends the majority of the rest of her trip with him instead of with her friends who she was hanging out with, and they didn't have an issue with that. They were like, okay girl, we see you, do your thing. Now, not only do they have this captivating attraction for each other, they also have a lot in common. Once they get to talking, Lana had run away from home at the age of 14, and she had started dancing before she was even 18 to kind of, bring in money for herself. So they both had that in common, to where they both left home kind of young. They were out here doing jobs that they were not old enough to do. Lana lived a gypsy lifestyle where she would just travel wherever her little heart's desire and her little inquisitiveness led her. Once she returned to Dallas, the two two continue to talk daily, like all the time. Zach would beg her to come back down and visit him. And just 3 weeks later, after they initially met, she decides, you know what, I miss you too. I'm on the way. Once she returns to New Orleans, the two are again inseparable. Zach is able to talk Lana into moving there permanently with him. He tells her that, you know, while she can come down there, work their clubs, and he can work the bartending life, and together they could just be this nightlife power couple. And she sees it. She sees the vision, and she decides, you know what? Why not? When she first gets there, things are great. She finds a club to work at. He is still, of course, bartending. The two are doing well for themselves. But not long after her moving in with Zack, she finds out that Zack is just 18. Zack didn't necessarily lie about his age. He just never brought it up. And she assumed that because he was a bartender that he was at least 21. Which was not the case. Homie was still 18. And this freaked her out. And as if this was not bad enough for poor Lana, it was during this time that she also finds out that she is pregnant. So it's like, girl, what am I to do? Do you know how violated I would feel being pregnant by what I would think of as a child? At first, she doesn't even tell Jack that she is pregnant. She found out that she was pregnant in late 96, and she doesn't tell him until March of 97. Sis waited till she just could not wait anymore. And during this time they weren't together, so it's not like she was hiding the pregnancy right under his nose. No, mama had left him. She just couldn't get down with the age thing. Like, she just felt like the gap was too big. When she finally does decide to tell Zack about the pregnancy, she just pretty much gives him the option to be in the child's life or not be in the child's life. She told him that, you know, I know you're young and it's a lot of responsibilities. You don't have to be involved. I'm just letting you know what's going on. And Zack is very much happy and excited about it. He says that he definitely wants to be in his child's life. He was in love with Lana. He wanted to be with her, and he felt like, you know, age ain't nothing but a number. Unfortunately, she was still very much uneasy about his age and the gap, and so she remained very distant throughout her whole entire pregnancy. She actually didn't even tell him that she had gone into labor when she did. It wasn't even until a few weeks after she had given birth that Zack was notified, and she didn't even tell him. It was a friend of hers that called Zack and told him, like, hey, sis had the baby, a son that she named Jackson. He immediately goes to where Lana is to see his son, and he falls in love with the baby. He is in love with the idea of being a father. He is just in love with his kid, all of the things. Now, his love for his son and his devotion to being just the best father that he could be, it began to weaken the wall that Miss Girl had built between them because of the age gap. Like, she started to soften up and entertain the idea, despite the age gap, maybe they could be a family. Maybe it could work out. While spending time with his son, he works his way back into little old Lana's heart. Now that he's turned 19, I don't know if she felt a little more secure that extra year or what. But when he turns 19, she decides to see if they could give their relationship another chance. Like, maybe it could work. He got a mature, he got a job, he being a dad. Maybe this could work. Zack was extremely happy about this. He was so happy he got another chance to just prove himself to Lana and have a family. He was more than ready to be a loving and devoted partner to her and the best father that he could be to little baby Jackson. Homie was excited. Okay, he was thrilled. He picked up a second bartending job just to get some extra income because now he was the head of a whole household and he had something to prove to his boo. He wanted to prove to Lana that she could depend on him and that he could be a great provider to her and their son. So he's working 2 jobs. He spent most of his free time with Lana and Jackson. There was a period where he had started to go out a lot and drink with his friends, but on one of those nights he was in the car with a friend of his and the police pulled him over and he got busted for a possession charge, which whatever was in the car actually belonged to his friend, but because he was in the car he picked up a charge too. It actually got dismissed, but this was the wake-up call that he needed because after this he begins to focus solely on his family and leave the nightlife alone. After a few months on the straight and narrow, he proposes to Lana. He asks for her hand in marriage. Lana was also pregnant again with their second child, and so she agrees to marry Zack. And shortly after their wedding, the couple welcomed their second child, a daughter that they named Lily. After the birth of Lily, Zack felt like his 2 bartending jobs, they just were no longer cutting it to support his family. So he calls up his brother Jed. Remember little Jed? Jed was in the army, and so he was asking Jed all these questions about the military life, and Jed told him that he felt like it would be a good opportunity for him to go into the army. He tells Zack that it's a lot of benefits, that it would be a great opportunity for him to take care of his family. Zack is excited. In late 1999, Zack goes and gets his GED so that he could join the army, and on May 12th of 2000 he enlists in the army on an 8-year term. Lana supported her husband's decision 100% to go into the military. She felt like it would be a good opportunity for their family, and it also would provide her the opportunity to stay home with the kids. She would no longer have to strip. She could just, you know, be a cute little housewife and take care of the kids. This decision also got him a couple of brownie points with his wife, because she just admired the fact that he was willing to step up and, you know, make this decision on behalf of their family and to be able to take care of them like she lived for it. Zack, contrary to his free-spirited life, he adapted to the military life very easily. He felt like he belonged. He felt like he blended in with his fellow soldiers. And he very quickly became very popular among them as the jovial bartender of the group. One of Zack's fellow soldiers actually described being around Zack as addictive because of his bright personality. Like, people loved him. He had the ability to draw people in wherever he went. Now, it wasn't long before his newfound love for the military was jaded, unfortunately. During one of his deployments in Kosovo, he had given a little 8-year-old Albanian girl a piece of candy, and he found out that the next day she was killed just for talking to an American. This broke his heart. He was devastated. He felt like it was kind of his fault, and it just really messed him up. And it also didn't help that during this time, Lana was still back in New Orleans taking care of the kids by herself. She had not completed the paperwork for her and the kids to be able to live on base with him where he was stationed over in Germany. All of this really had a negative effect on his emotional and mental health. He was really going through a lot. Like, a lot. And to make matters worse, his size 17 shoe did not fit properly in his combat boots. So he had developed hammer toe, which I thought was a dance. Hammer toe ain't no damn dance. What is it? It's hammer time and the heel toe is what I'm mixing together. Talking about hammer toe is a dance. It ain't no damn dance. Anyway, whatever the case, he had hammer toe and it needed surgery in order to be corrected. He returns to New Orleans to have the surgery and to recover, and he is excited about this. He was looking forward to it because he hadn't seen the kids in a while. He missed his wife, and just being home in the city that he loved just would do him some good with all that he had gone through on deployment. While he was home, he also completed the paperwork that was required of her to join him on base. And see, Lana hadn't completed the paperwork on purpose. Sis didn't want to join him because she was kind of ashamed of her past being an exotic dancer. She felt like people would judge her, and she just wasn't ready for that. Zack had actually told all of his little soldier friends that sis was an exotic dancer because he wasn't ashamed at all of Lana. Like, he accepted every part of her. He loved Lana. Now, once joining him over in Germany, Lana spent a lot of her time alone when her husband wasn't available. His friends didn't seem to judge her past, but apparently their wives did. So she felt really ostracized and judged, and like hoes didn't want to mind their own business, wanted to act like their little lives was perfect and that they made all of the best choices. I forgot I had this wine over here. Now, after September 11th, he was deployed to Iraq, and by this time, he started to resent the military a lot. He no longer really believed in their missions. He felt like they were just being used as propaganda. Like, the military really started to leave a bad taste in his mouth. Plus, his hammer toe was acting up again. The surgery wasn't all that successful. It actually kind of made it worse because by now, he was having a difficult time walking. Because of this, they put him on desk duty, and he hated that. He hated that so much. He felt like he was, in his own words, the back office bitch. But nevertheless, despite how he felt, he continued to work hard, and not long after that he was promoted to sergeant. But this excitement for his promotion was very short-lived because not right after this he was informed that back in Germany, Lana had been diagnosed with hepatitis C, which had begun to progress pretty rapidly, and not long after the diagnosis she was no longer able to take care of herself, really, let alone take care of 2 children by herself. Zack joined her back in Germany, but the army only allowed him to go home for just 2 weeks to aid his wife and take care of the kids and look after her, and then he was forced to rejoin the troops over in Iraq. Lana's condition continued to rapidly decline. Like, it was getting pretty bad really quick. She was very, very upset at the news that her husband would have to leave her again. Her doctors wrote letters to military officials telling them like, hey, homie needs to be here. He does not need to leave her and the kids. She can't, she can't do this by herself. Even the Red Cross attempted to intervene and express how crucial it was for Zack to return to his wife's bedside. The military wasn't trying to hear that. Like, they completely denied his request to return home to his wife. Like, their refusals to allow him to return home to his sick wife ruined the last little bit of positive outlook that he had on the military and the military life. Like, at this point, he was just completely done. Like, he hated it here. And you know the old saying, when it rains, it pours. There was a soldier by the name of Rachel who was like the female version of him. She boosted a lot of the morale. She was very artistic, just like Zack. She was a tattoo artist back home. The two of them got along really well. They actually kept up the morale of, the troops over there, the little group. I don't know what it's called. Is it a squadron? I don't know. Shout out to the troops. I love y'all. Happy belated Veterans Day. Sis was one of the few things over there that just kept him going, as well as a lot of the other troops. Like, they loved Rachel. She was that girl. She was the life of the party. During this time, he unfortunately lost Rachel. She unfortunately loses her life, and this took a huge toll and had a very negative effect on Zack, of course. So he's also dealing with that. But things began to turn around for Zack just a little bit when he meets a little Iraqi boy by the name of Rashid. Rashid's family owned a small convenience store that wasn't too far from where Zack lived. The little boy would come and bring Zack Cokes and ice from his family store, and in exchange, Zack would teach him English. So he kind of took the little boy under his wing as like a mentee. This went on for a while, and with everything going on in Zack's life, he found solace in his big brother role to Rashid. The two formed an amazing bond, teaching each other of their cultural differences, and it really kind of kept Zack's mind off of all the bad. It made being over in Iraq tolerable. Now, word spread that Rashid was helping Americans. When this happened, their family store was blown up with the entire family inside, including little Rashid. That's so sad. Y'all know I get sensitive about the kids, and I'm drinking wine. Mama's trying not to shed a tear. After this happened, Zack fell into the deepest depression. Like, this was the second time that something like this had happened. And again, he felt like it was kind of his fault, which is so sad. Like, I can't imagine. Plus, Rashid was the only thing that made being over there somewhat tolerable and somewhat worth it. And although in neither instance was it really his fault, but his actions have been the cause of both tragedies, and he just found it hard to live with himself. After this happened, he rarely left his room unless he absolutely had to. He completely shut down and remained to himself for the rest of his deployment. Then he returned home to Lana and the kids over in Germany. But when he returned, he was not the same Zack that she knew. He was a completely different man. The Zack that returned to her this time was completely reserved, completely shut off from the world. He was very distant and very bitter, and this really worried her because, like I said, he was nothing like the man that she had known and fallen in love with. He was just different. He had also began to showcase early signs of PTSD, night sweats, nightmares, shortness of breath, headaches all the time. His back and his feet ached all the time because, he had the hammer toe thing going on that was only getting worse. At this time, he had actually reached his breaking point with the military, and he decided that if they didn't want to release him, he would force them to do so by consistently failing his PT test. And so he would constantly do that, and they would constantly threaten his ass that if he didn't pull it together and start passing his PT test, that he would be put out. Sis was like, bet. He continued to fail his PT test, and finally in the fall of 2004 he was officially discharged due to unsatisfactory performance. Now, one of his superiors had actually recommended him for an honorable discharge due to his work ethic and how quickly he had moved up and just all of his achievements in the military. The fact that he had served in both Kosovo and Iraq, they felt like, look, he deserves an honorary discharge or honorable discharge. Plus, he had no disciplinary marks on his record, like, whatsoever. He didn't get into any trouble. He was just an all-around good soldier. Despite this, he received a general discharge, which the consequences for that were pretty terrible. I'm no expert, but from what I read, it sounded as if a general discharge is just as bad as a dishonorable discharge, because he lost all of his benefits, including his health and educational benefits. And I also read that a general discharge can make it difficult for you to obtain employment in the civilian world. Child, not where I work. They hire anybody. If you got a pulse and somebody's social security card, you got a job. Now, he had kept his whole plan in disdain from Lana the whole time. She had no clue that he was this fed up with the military, or that he had planned to fail his PT test and get out. None of the things. She thought that they were riding for the full 8 years that he signed up for, until he received his general discharge and showed up at the doorstep like, I'm out, like he fresh out of jail or something. Sis, you out of a job. You out of benefits. That's what you out of. Anyway, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to tell the story. He comes home and he tells Lana that he is out of the military officially, and she is like, what? Like, she is pissed, because in her mind, he just abandoned the very thing that allowed her to quit her job as an exotic dancer and for him to not have to work double shifts as a bartender. In her mind, he had just given up all of their benefits, and she was pissed. Sis immediately leaves him and the kids and returns to New Orleans to find a place to stay and a job. Y'all, when she picked Zack and the kids up from the airport, she tells Zack that in the time that she had been in New Orleans securing a place to stay and a job, sis had also secured a relationship. She was with a whole new man, and she no longer wanted to be with Zack. Zack is pissed. He has nowhere else to go. He was counting on, returning back to wherever she found for them to stay and getting a job and supporting his family. But that was not the plan, because sis no longer wanted to be a family. Unfortunately, she takes the kids home with her, and Zack goes to a hotel room. He began working the graveyard shifts at one of the bars on the French Quarter, and he was kind of happy because he enjoyed the nightlife. Like, he was back to work in the nightlife scene, attracting all of this attention from the local patrons, both male and female. They both loved them some Zack, honey. Zack was fine, they say. Zack was getting all of the attention from all of the boys and most of the girls, except for the one girl that had caught his eye, Miss Addison Hall, aka Addie. Now, Addie was a short, very feisty, fiery girl with dirty blonde hair. She was cute. She liked to dance. She had a very short temper as well. She was 29 years old. She worked the day shift at the same bar that Zack worked at, and she often got into fights with the other female bartenders. Sis was a violent little mess. We're not gonna give her too much though. I ain't gonna give her too much. Despite the red flags, Zack was like immediately smitten. Like, he loved him some Addie. He didn't care about the liabilities that she came with. He was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. In the spring of 2005, Addie finally began to show signs that Zack was beginning to wear her down, and she was kind of, letting him in a little bit, kind of attracted. She joined Zack at the bar, and the two began to talk, have shots of Jaeger. That's how he always get his women. I noticed he had a pattern of getting women with the Jaeger, because that's how he got Lana. Over shots of Jaeger, she begins to tell Zack her life story. She was raised in Durham, North Carolina by a Vietnam veteran, and her mother was a homemaker. She had dropped out of high school because she was more interested in her artistic abilities than her schoolwork. And from there, she chose to travel the country and just live out her free-spiritedness. From there, she chose to travel the country and just live free and young, the same way Zack had done. So he saw that as something they had in common, and he really appreciated that about her. She too had planned to just come sightsee in New Orleans, but when she got here, she fell in love with the city the same way he had done and decided to stay. Sis worked the nightlife scene and loved it. She had a huge personality, and she made friends with everyone you meet. You know how they say that about some people. Like, she was just that girl that just got along with everyone. Until she got drunk and wanted to fight them. But we're getting there. Now, Addie also had a dark side to her. She would drink very heavily, which was not a good pairing to her little old hot temper. She was known as a very, very mean drunk who would also become very filled with rage and very physically aggressive when she was under the influence. Sis liked to fight. She liked to get full and fight. That's what she liked to do. Sis also liked her some coke. And I'm not talking about to drink. Talking about the other one. which reportedly took her to a whole nother level when she was intoxicated and feeling all violent. Once she hit that, she was just invincible, angry and invincible. The people closest to her, they learned to kind of stay away from her or remove themselves from her presence during these dark spells. That's what they called them, her dark spells. Around the time her and Zack met, these dark spells have become increasingly regular. Sis was showing out all the time. She had been in a plethora of bar fights, which she had cracked beer bottles over folks' heads. That's what she liked to do. Honey, I only seen that happen on the movies. Addie was very small, but she had a lot of anger built up inside of her, some of which was a result of childhood trauma. She had been taken advantage of sexually, and she was actually hospitalized at the age of 13 as a result of this. But despite how damaged and destructive Addie was, Zack really took a liking to her. Like, he really adored her anyway. And the two soon became inseparable. She took a liking to him just as he had taken a liking to her. Now, shortly after this, Miss Katrina started brewing. The mayor had encouraged most of the residents to evacuate, but it wasn't mandatory. And so Zack and Addie decided they weren't going nowhere. They loved their life on the French Quarter. They loved New Orleans, and they were not about to abandon it over some little storm. When things started to get really bad, Lana called Zack in a panic, and she was like, what are we gonna do? We have these kids, like, where are we gonna go? And he tells her, like, he's not going anywhere. He's staying there with Addie. And Lana's like, you can bring Addie with you. Like, she just wanted the father of her kids to be safe. And so she told him, if being with this woman means that much to you, like, you can just bring her along. We can all travel together. But he said no. And Lana was pissed. This also worried Lana because she felt like it was completely unlike Zack to seemingly choose a woman over his children. But she had to do what was best for her kids, which was evacuate. So she grabbed her kids and headed back to Dallas. Meanwhile, the storm hits, and Zack and Addie, they ride it out right there on the French Quarter in their little apartment in the city that they have fallen in love with, leading them to fall in love with each other. Even with over 80% of New Orleans underwater, Zack and Addie refused to leave. Like, they weren't trying to go nowhere. And the French Quarter where they lived was not nearly as affected as the rest of New Orleans. They pretty much were just without electricity. And oddly, the two become very fond of the survivalist lifestyle. Like, they enjoyed scavenging for food and supplies during the daylight hours. They would host little campfire shindigs for the other people who decided to stay and stick around. Child, they would cook little canned goods over the open fire for the people and bartend, make the people cocktails. Child, being bartenders, doing what they do, or did, doing what they did. Y'all, I blew out and cut my hair last night, my real hair. A lot of people ask me for updates since I shaved my head, like, what is my hair looking like? I posted on my social media an update. I don't know if it made it to YouTube or not, but here it is. She back, okay? I just don't know what to do with her. And I don't have any hair growth tips because, honestly, since I shaved my head, I've just been deep conditioning the hell out of my hair and stuffing her under wigs and in braids because I don't know what to do with it. I think this is only like my second time straightening it. But anyway, this ain't a hair video. Let me get back to the story because I know y'all probably like, bitch, we don't care about your hair. We want to know what happened with Zack and Addie. Now, after things began to return to normal for New Orleans, Zack and Addie returned to their bartending jobs, but they were kind of disappointed that things returned to normal because they kind of really enjoyed the survivalist lifestyle. Like, they were sad that it was over. Who enjoys the struggle? Why? Like I said, Lana had returned to Dallas with the kids. She had picked up a waitress job. They had stayed in a homeless shelter for a while. Sis was really out there hustling for her kids. She worked for a while as a waitress at Applebee's to support the kids. But now that New Orleans was kind of getting back to normal, she decided to return to New Orleans. She wasn't even aware that Zack was still alive and kicking and thriving because after that last phone call, he completely stopped answering her phone calls. Like, she could not get in touch with him at all. So she feared like the worst had happened because she knew he had stayed there. And she didn't believe him to be the type that would abandon his kids. So she just knew like something bad had happened. Little did she know his ass was out here playing Rick and Maughan with old Addie. Do y'all know where they came from, Rick and Maughan? Now, when sis found out that he was indeed still alive and kicking, she showed up to where he was staying with a baseball bat, demanding that he came out. She cut up right outside that door. He wasn't home at the time, but Addie was. Big bad Addie, though, was scared to come outside. Maybe she wasn't intoxicated. I don't know. But for whatever reason, Addie was just looking at sis through the peephole. She didn't want none of what Lana had going on. Sis was just sitting on the inside looking at the outside. Maybe if she had a little liquor courage or a little powder power, she would have been with the shits that day. But she wasn't, so she didn't go outside. Later that day, Zack returns home and he finds out about Lana's antics. He calls her and he's just like, I just want to see you and the kids. I miss the kids. And Lana was like, look, you're not about to be walking in and out of my kids' life. I'll agree to meet up with you, but I'm not about to agree for you to meet up with the kids until I know and believe that you're going to be consistent. They meet up and they agreed that Zack will take the kids on the weekends. And that'll be the arrangement. Like, he'll get them on the weekends, keep them all weekend. That's the thing. When he tells Addie about this, she is thrilled. She's excited. She goes out and she buys things for the kids. And she is just so excited about them getting them on the weekend. And he's like relieved because he felt like maybe she wasn't down with the stepmama lifestyle. But she was excited. Or at least she pretended to be. Because the very first weekend that Zack got the kids, she went out and spent the entire night out in the bars drinking and partying. And this became a reoccurring thing. Every weekend that he would have the kids, sis would disappear and go party and come home like on Monday, and she didn't miss the whole weekend. Zack was confused because he's like, you pretended to be so excited. Like, girl, what happened? He would always complain about this. This caused a big issue in their relationship. And during one argument about it, Addie tells Zack that from now on, you need to get a hotel room on the weekends when you have the kids. Like, don't even bring them here. Y'all go to a hotel. I would have broke up with sis so fast. Like, excuse me, bitch. And by this time, the kids are old enough to understand what's going on. So they tell Lana that Addie does not like them. This caused even more issues between Zack, Addie, and now Lana. Like, all three of the adults got issues with each other now. Zack picked up another job as a grocery deliverer, which he loved this job. He loved this job so much. It had actually sparked a light in him that had been dim for a very long time. Even Lana noticed that his confidence had begun to come back, and for the first time in a long time, she began to see parts of him that made her remember why she had fallen in love with him in the beginnings. This was like, that's the man that I knew and loved. But as fate would have it for Zack, he had begun experimenting with drugs along with Addie. It was becoming a lot more frequent. Addie had actually begun drinking really heavily again, and her dark spells were back bigger and badder than ever. One night, she became so drunk and belligerent that she goes off on Zack and a friend of theirs, and she's like hitting really below the belt. She's saying some really nasty, vile, volatile things, and he decides, you know what, I'm done with your ass. He takes his money, he takes a couple of his clothes, and he goes to see his family in Oregon, and he tells her he doesn't even know when he's coming back or if he's coming back at all. That's what he tells Addie. He's sick of her. He's sick of all of the things. But it wasn't long before he began to miss her and their toxic ass relationship. And so after a couple of weeks, he tells his family that he needed to return to New Orleans because of the kids. Like, he needed to be where his kids were. And he needed to make up for the time that he had abandoned them during the storm. But he also returns to Addie. Who had missed him and promised that she just would not be so disrespectful, so nasty, and so rude going forward. And for a little while, they have this new honeymoon stage, this reunited and it feels so good stage. But it wasn't long after that that things returned to their toxic nature in their relationship. They were back to their heavy drinking and intense fighting. Now, Zack had always received a lot of attention from both male and female admirers, especially in his line of work. Addie was just doing the most at this time, and he felt like he couldn't escape her in the regular bars, and the bar was like his relief. That was like his happy place. The only place that he could get away from her was the gay bars. So he would frequent the gay bars, flirt with the boys, have him some drinks, and he wouldn't have to worry about running into Addie or any of her bartender friends or any of their coworkers. Like, it was a safe space for him. One of the guys in the bar is showing him a little extra special attention, and he's flirting back and he's living for it, and the two form a relationship. Now, their relationship was a secret from Addie, but that pretty much was it. Like, he was only hiding it from her, but he wasn't really hiding it from the world. He was out and about with his boyfriend. They would go to the bars together and be like out and open with their, PDA. He told his friends that he was a little bi, and his friends kept his secret. They really didn't judge him, but it wasn't long before Addie found out about Zach's boyfriend. When she confronted him about his man, it was the worst, most rage-filled attack that she had ever spewed on anybody. She took his phone, she called everybody in the phone book one by one, telling them that he was gay, that he had AIDS. And then she was deleting the numbers as she went along. So it was like, call, da-da-da-da-da, delete, next person. She called him every slur that she could think of. She physically attacked him, and the two break up. Not long after they break up, Miss Addie calls Zach back, and she is telling him how she's struggling financially, she needs help. She tells him she's about to be homeless. This whole woe is me story. And she asks him like, hey, maybe we should get an apartment together just to help both of us out. Maybe we can work on this. Like, let's just try this again. Now, Zach agrees to get a place with her, and the two move into this small apartment above a voodoo spiritual temple. Just 2 days after the two move into the apartment, Addie goes into the landlord's office, and she is yelling and screaming about how she's found out that Zach is cheating on her. She's putting him out of the apartment. Now, at this point, they had not done the paperwork, and the lease hadn't been drawn up. So Addie tells the landlord like, hey, I need you to draw me up a lease with just my name on it. Leave his name off. This is going to be my apartment. Now, mind you, at the time that they got the keys, Zach paid the first and last month's rent. The landlord draws up the lease for 6 months, gives it to Addie with just her name on it. And literally 5 minutes after Addie leaves the landlord's office, Zach calls the landlord and was like, she's lying, she's a liar, and that he had put up all the money for the apartment whole 2 months, and that was all the money that he had, and if he got put out of the apartment, this would be a financial setback for him. The landlord at this point is just like, you know what, y'all need to settle this and leave me out of it. Now, on top of her putting him out, Zach had actually had plans to get the kids this weekend, so he was really pissed that Addie was pulling this stunt, and he's like, I ain't going nowhere. I refuse to leave. I'm staying. This was on a Wednesday. Now, Thursday morning, he gets up October 5th. He goes to work. He runs into a mutual friend of him and Addie's, and the mutual friend is like, damn, you look bad. Like, you look rough. He tells the friend, like, me and Addie were fighting last night. You know how she does. She had one of her dark spells. She really went in, and I really didn't get any sleep because I was dealing with that. He also tells the friend that Addie took his money and said she was leaving and going to North Carolina with her family, and that she didn't know when she would be back. The friend thought that this was kind of a weird story, but he was just like, you know, Addie crazier. She's done crazier things, so hey, maybe she did take his money and run off. 12 days later, at around 5 p.m. on October 17th, 2006, Zach walks into the La Riviera rooftop pool bar located on the 7th floor of the Omni Royale Hotel in New Orleans, and he starts a tab. Now, he spends the next 3 hours drinking Jameson, like taking shots, smoking, and seemingly daydreaming, just spaced out and full of the liquor. As he gets up and begins pacing anxiously around the pool, the bartender starts watching him because he feels like homeboy is about to run out on his tab. Like, he might be about to run out without paying. Let me keep my eye on him. Instead, Zach walks over to the railing of the rooftop and jumps. He lands on the top of the parking garage, 5 stories down, face up, dying instantly. Now, police are called to the scene immediately. They come out and they find a Ziploc bag inside of Zach's front pocket of his jeans. It had his military dog tags inside, his ID, keys to his apartment, and a note. And the note read, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own to pay for the one that I took. If you send a patrol to 826 North Rampart, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, on the stove, and in the fridge, along with full documentation on the both of us and a full signed confession from myself, Zach Bowen." When the police go to check out the scene, they find exactly what was described in the note. There were these odd messages spray painted on the walls inside the apartment, like, "I love my wife, please call her," with Lana's phone number spray painted on the wall. There was one that said, "Please help me stop this pain." He had spray painted, "I'm a total failure," on the wall. And there was also a huge silver arrow pointed above the stove, like pointing down to the stove. Inside of the oven were her legs in a roasting pan, charred and black. Her head was in a large cooking pot on the front burner of the stove. Her hands and feet were in another cooking pot on the back burner, both of which had been cooked like for a very, very long time. And then her torso was wrapped in a black trash bag inside of the refrigerator. The apartment surprisingly didn't have much of an odor to it, but that was because Zach had put the AC on like 60 and had it going on its highest setting possible. So the apartment was like freezing cold. Detectives also found a 5-page confession letter written by Zack detailing what led up to the event and everything that he had done. So the night that the two were fighting and she tried to kick him out of the apartment, he said that he snapped and attacked Addie, saying, quote, "She had stolen this apartment and tried to kick me out. She would not shut the fuck up, so I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick." He then had relations with her and passed out next to her on the bed. The next morning, he got up and went to work as if nothing had happened. That's when he ran into old boy and he told him he looked like freshly laid shit. He said it had been a long night. Now, remember, this was his weekend to get the kids. So when it came down to him getting the kids from Lana, he calls her. He offered up her the $600 that he was behind in child support. And he asked her to meet up with him, bring the kids. They had a nice family outing, a good time. He gives her the money. And then he tells her that he's still trying to get his place together because him and Addie just moved in. So she asked him, like, "Are you sure this is going to be okay with Addie? Like, don't y'all used to get a hotel room?" And he tells her, "Oh, Addie won't be there, so everything is fine." And she's like, okay. He said that it took him 4 days to decide what to do with her. During that time, he went about his life as normal. Now, friends who met up with him during this time said that he seemed in good spirits and seemed to be happier than ever. He spent his days drinking, partying, living it up with good strippers, and doing hood rat shit with his friends, okay? All of this was an attempt to numb the shock of what he had done. And according to what he wrote, it kind of did. He was able to not think about it until, of course, he had to go back home and sis was still there. On the 4th day, he moved Addie to the bathtub where he dismembered her and cleaned the bathroom up. Like, there was not a drop of anything anywhere. Like, the bathroom was immaculately clean. He said that he felt like cooking the pieces would make it easier to dispose of. I don't know if he thought it was just gonna turn to ashes. Like, what you thought, sir? I'm confused. But now, despite a lot of rumors, there was none of her found inside of him. Like, he did not consume any of it. When his clothes were removed, he was also covered in like cigarette burns, like all over his body, 28 to be exact. He said that he had burned himself with a cigarette for every year that he had been a failure, and it was 1 burn for every year of his life. Like, sis, how you gonna count 1 through 5 though? Ain't nobody a failure between the ages of 1 through 5. We all get that little grace period. He also expressed a great deal of remorse and regret. His last comments about what he had done was, quote, "I scared myself not only by the action of calmly strangling a woman that I've loved for 1.5 years, but my entire lack of remorse." I guess he wasn't remorseful. "I've known forever how horrible of a person I am. Ask anyone." The security cameras at the Omni Royale captured him approaching the edge, downing his drink, and then just throwing himself over. Like, it was bad. After detectives pieced together what happened, they informed her of, what had happened. She was completely taken aback. Like, this completely shocked her. She was completely thrown off. She was then left with the task of informing his family. She called his family and let them know. She tried to protect her children from the details. It hit the media and spread like wildfire, and she was very upset by what he had done. She said that she actually was happy that he had his own life because she said she couldn't deal with having these kids and going through like a public trial and it just dragging on. Like, she felt like that was best, I guess, for the kids. That's what she says. This, I don't know, some of y'all might agree. I just feel like that's kind of harsh to say, but I can't judge her because I ain't know how she was. I don't know. This lady also turned their apartment into like this museum, and she had like the female and male Chucky dolls, and she had like fake like fake blood on the walls, and like she was charging people to come through and see the stove and like view the apartment, and it was like this whole attraction. A lot of people were mad about it. I don't think it's still up today. I'm not sure if you're from New Orleans, you know about this. Let me know, girl. I don't think it's still operating. But I don't know. That is it for this video. It's probably really long. If you enjoyed today's look, I really love it because, you know, mama love her some pink. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to share with a friend. Subscribe if you have not. You know, you ain't got to watch from outside the club. Girl, you can get in. Become correct because the bouncers will check you at the door. As always, I appreciate you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace. What they really wanted to do was travel the country and just live out their free spirit. Just live out their free spiritedness. All of this really had a negative effect on his personality. Wait. Lana had been described or diagnosed. Sis had a very, very short temperature. What temperature? Oh my God. Temper. The mayor had encouraged all of the residents. The mayor had encouraged. What is encouraged? Not kinda. They really enjoyed the survivor list. What is a survivor list? Now later that day, Rick. Okay, I'll call him Rick.